Hi, friends and family.
Hello.
Who's this? This is my brother. He's my fantasy football guru. Most of what I know about playing fantasy football, I learned from him. And we're so lucky to have him with us. I brought him in today to help me talk about a really important topic, which is the waiver wire. And so we're jumping the gun a little bit. The next video in the series should have been one about weekly team maintenance, but we've had this situation arise within our own friends and family league. And in addition, I've gotten some questions here on the channel about the use of the waiver wire. So we're jumping the gun a little bit, and we're going to dive right into the discussion of the waiver wire today. So what is the waiver wire?
Yeah, the waiver wire basically is the pool of undrafted free agents. So if you think about it in a standard fantasy football league, 10 teams, everyone selected or drafted 16 players. That's 160 players taken or drafted or owned. There's a whole bunch of other players that are unowned in your league that are available to you right now.
So there's this kind of saying in fantasy football, which is that the team you win with is not the team that you drafted. And the waiver wire provides you with an opportunity each week to perhaps get rid of some players for various reasons and to pick up players that are going to benefit your team. So let's launch into a discussion of how you use the waiver wire.
Yeah, how do you do it? So basically, depending on the system that you're using, whether you're on the ESPN Fantasy Football site or Yahoo, there's slightly different ways of going about it. But for the most part, anytime starting Tuesday morning, after Monday Night Football, makes sense, the close of the week, from Tuesday morning to Wednesday night, you've got the opportunity to go onto your site and request a player from this pool of undrafted free agents. And the way that you do that is by logging in, and I'll use the ESPN site as an example. When I click on my team, there's a drop down for add player. You can simply click on add player, and there's going to be lists of all the free agents that are available to you, broken down by quarterback, wide receiver, running back. You'll click on that and pick a player, and we'll get into strategy and when you do it and why you do it in a bit. But it'll then ask you, well, which player are you going to drop? So that's it. You can bring on a player from the pool of undrafted free agents, but the downside is you have to be able to give up a player, right?
Yes, and so one thing we want to mention is that you won't know whether or not you get that player because every week there'll be a different waiver priority, and depending on your league settings, which you should definitely check into, there are different ways of determining waiver priority, and commonly the waiver order is determined by either who got the lowest number of points the week before. They'll get the first pick on the waiver wire. Sometimes it's whoever's lowest in the standings, they get the first pick on the waiver wire. And then I was in a league once where the waiver order was determined by the draft order. So it was in the reverse order of the draft. So the last person who got to draft was the first in the waiver order. And that kind of rotated through the draft order for the season. And it just worked that way. So check your league settings to find out how it works, how your waiver order is determined. And then we also want to mention that the choice you make, the player you ask for, is a secret.
Yeah, keep it a secret. You don't want to tip your hand to the other players in your fantasy football league of who you need or want to pick up off the waiver wire, because if they have a waiver selection that has a higher priority than you, meaning they're going to get their selection filled first, they might block you by grabbing your player. So you'll want to keep it quiet. You can tell which waiver selection you have, again, on using ESPN as an example. On the My Team tab, it'll show waiver order. And for instance, on my league, I keep looking over right now, I'm 7 out of 8. So we have an 8-team league in this particular league I'm speaking of, and I am 7th in order.
So the first 6 players are all their waivers are gonna have priority over anything that Neil puts in this week. So it's something to keep in mind. If you have the first waiver priority, lucky you. You're gonna get your first choice of players, and you know you're gonna get them. But if you don't have first priority,
it's good to have select a player that you want or need, but then also you can make multiple selections. Select a second option, a third option. I've even done 4th and 5th option, just in case the people above me, someone grabs the player I wanted, the system will automatically know that and default to my second choice, third choice, fourth choice. Now, if it does get my second choice, well, that's great. It's going to knock out all the selections underneath it. So,
Right. All right. So that's basically it. Just to recap, the way it works is that from Monday morning through from Tuesday morning through Wednesday evening, people are putting in their waiver requests. You don't know who other people in your league have requested. They don't know who you've requested. And then on Wednesday evening at some point, the players are distributed according to the waiver order. And then from Thursday on, from Thursday through Monday, you can just pick up players without putting in a waiver request. You just have to select a player who's out there that you want and then drop the player that you don't want, send them back out into the pool. And that keeps going until waivers kick in again on Tuesday morning. The reason you want to put in the waiver is because all the good players might be taken by the time you get around to
yeah, the free agent pickup.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about some of the times that we might use the waiver wire, and some of the reasons we might use it.
Sure. So let's say hypothetically you made a mistake in your draft. Maybe you drafted 2 kickers accidentally.
You know who you are.
And she'll find you. Or maybe you didn't realize when you were drafting, but you draft too many players with the same bye week. So you need to pick up a player for that. So you made some form of mistake in the draft in which you wish to correct it. That's one reason to use the waiver wire.
Mm-hmm. Another reason you might use the waiver wire are season-ending injuries. So if your player gets injured and they're just out for maybe a week or two, you might want to hang on to them if they're a great player. But if they're out for the rest of the season or even for a really long time, you don't want them taking up space on your bench. You might need to go out to the waiver wire, get rid of that injured player, and pick up somebody to take their place.
Or if you drafted Josh Gordon, for instance, prior to the suspension decision, well, now you need to find another good wide receiver. Exactly.
Another reason that you might want to get rid of somebody is because you might have underperforming players.
Yeah, I was a victim of that last year. I drafted Tom Brady as my quarterback in one of my leagues. And in that league, I made the mistake of not moving him to my bench and pulling in another quarterback. I held out hope week after week that he would turn things around. But just because of the lack of depth in his wide receiver position, he didn't have targets around him. So he struggled. Now, I do know some people that were in the same position as I was in, and they went and picked up Nick Foles. And you pick up Nick Foles in week 5 or 6. Nick Foles ended up scoring the 11th most fantasy football points for a quarterback, and he missed the first 4 or 5 games. So that was an example of an underperforming player, Tom Brady, for good reason because of the team around him last year. But then picking up a player who really emerged and took off. And people that did that, those people, for the most part, had a very good shot at making the playoffs in their fantasy football leagues.
Yes. And then another reason why you might want to think about picking up a player is, like, even if you don't have somebody who's necessarily underperforming, they're just kind of mediocre. But maybe there's this running back out here in the pool of free agents who's exploding. So it might be a great time to bring him into your lineup, incorporate him into your team, anything to improve your team, right?
Happens every year. Stars emerge.
All right. So, and then the last thing we want to talk about, the last situation that you're really going to have to utilize the waiver wire in is the bye week situation. Because, for example, let's say you followed really good advice and you did not draft a backup kicker to block up a spot on your bench. So now your kicker's on a bye week. You need to pick up a kicker to replace your kicker while your kicker sits out. So you will utilize the waiver wire to get yourself the best possible kicker you can. And so can we talk a little bit about strategy as we discuss the bye week?
Yeah. So with bye weeks, do not, and I think Luann's mentioned it already, do not release your studs to make room for someone else to pick up for a bye week. Drop your studs onto the bench if you have to, but do not throw them out there. You don't want to hurt your own team, but B, you don't want to give your competitors a strong player, and someone will jump on it. I've been in leagues where it's a classic newbie mistake, where someone drops a stud to make room on the waiver wire. We're all over it. Your competitors will grab that player as soon as they can, and you won't have a chance to get them back.
Right, so that's something to remember. The other thing to remember is don't be overly afraid of that either. Like if you have a kicker who's going on a bye week, everyone else in your team is performing really well, don't worry, don't hesitate to put your kicker out there in the pool for a week while you pick up a bye week replacement. Because chances are, after your kicker's bye week's over, you're going to be able to go out there on the waiver wire and pick your original kicker back up. And that's pretty true of kickers, defenses, unless you have a defense who's really on fire and getting you major points week to week. You kind of want to hang on to them and maybe make room on your bench some other way. But those are kind of basic strategy points.
Yeah, I, from the defense perspective, obviously you're not going to put Seattle Seahawks or Carolina Panthers out there, but there's plenty of good defenses out there. The kickers are all pretty much the same. And so don't be afraid to put your kicker out there. And don't be afraid to keep an eye on kickers that are out there. I think you picked up some kickers last year that did great.
I did, yeah. So often, because just as a little side note, my kicker, the kicker I originally drafted, got injured and was out for the season the first week. So that stuff happens. I picked up a kicker off the waiver wire, did great for me. I'll probably pick him up again this year because he was a good kicker. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll either answer or we'll make another video if need be. Hope you found this helpful. Thank you, Neil, for being with us today. This was awesome. Hopefully, if you like this video, like it, please, because if we get enough likes, maybe he'll come back and do a video with us when we start talking about initiating trades. Okay, so until next video, bye and good luck.